That's good.
All it takes is just one time. We're all good in your life.
I'll call it like 7 p.m.
You figure it out. And then she said that. But some are slow.
What's your work schedule?
We're just like,
yeah, it's nice, isn't it? It's turned off.
as long as you get it.
Hi, Barrett. Good to see you. You look so cute today. I love you. Always. How are you? She's always like has general count around. We're both wearing the dresses. Good morning. And we finish at like 9. So we're like, no, we just do girl thing with Jess. I can't run down. You can just jump. How about like, yeah.
I didn't see either.
Typically, but I don't know. It might be someone even younger. I don't know. Ask Lisa. You can sign up. I don't know. I'm thinking about it. I have to see if I can you go and make sure you
No way.
It's a rainbow piece because yeah, I was like, I'm curious about actually hang out with friends outside church. Speaking of Sarah, seriously. I texted you. No, you did not. Yes, I did. I did text you. Okay, I see it now. I made a couple copies of the chapter, so I get it here. Yeah, you figured out that I have my. Good morning, you're right. Good.
I feel like someone told people I'd be speaking today, and that's why I want to be sure. No pressure. I feel pressure from Lucy. All right. Well, I guess we can get started. We're like 20 minutes in, so it's good. I've heard some time, so now we can go shorter. So, good morning, all. That's when you don't know me. I'm one of church interns, but it's summer. I feel like most of you guys know. In case you guys don't. You guys usually start with announcements. We got announcements over here. So on June 25th here, we've got the bridal shower for Taylor. So sitting right underneath. And then July 14th, we have this tool thing. I have no clue what that is, but you set up that in the gym. So I'm assuming it's some sort of rap star movement. To make it look fancy. And then August 11th through 13th, we have the college retreat up at Camp
It's fine. Also, I talked to them. Like, you don't have to pay anything beforehand. We're gonna take church vans out Thursday morning, come back Saturday. It is $25. They want you to bring cash. If you don't want to bring cash, you can Venmo me, and I will bring cash. So either way works.
Sweet. I think that's all that we got on there.
Invite people.
Yes. Thank you. Which is how you do the announcements.
Yeah.
Stressful points is good. I believe we were trying to have some hikes later in the summer as well. So we'll notify you. Alrighty, I guess let's go to the Lord in prayer. Dear Lord, we thank you for today, and we thank you for this time we can come and be in your word and be under the preaching of your word. I would just pray that you would speak to us today through your word, and that we would take something away that we can apply to our lives. In Jesus' name, amen. Okay, so we are in Ezra. Now we have finished the book of 2 Chronicles. It's actually kind of strange. As I was preparing, the last part of 2 Chronicles and the first part of Ezra are like exactly the same, like word for word. It almost seems like a typo that they repeated themselves. But it's just talking about the proclamation of King Cyrus in the end of 2 Chronicles and the beginning of Ezra. So we will be going through Ezra chapter 1 through 5, and it'll be a survey today. So in chapter 1, it begins off with the return of the Jewish exiles under Sheshbazzar. There's some weird names, so you guys are going to hear me butcher them all today. So, all right. And this is just an interesting fact, but originally the book of Ezra and Nehemiah were one book, later divided into more books by the early church. I'm not sure exactly why. But if you look at the content in Ezra and Nehemiah, they overlap a bit. Nehemiah references Ezra, and Ezra references Nehemiah. And so it's kind of cool. They lived during similar time periods, so they kind of like overlap. But you have here in verses 1 through 4, the decree of King Cyrus here. So it says in verse 1, now the first year of Cyrus, king of Persia, that the word of the Lord by the mouth of Jeremiah might be fulfilled. The Lord stirred up the spirit of Cyrus, king of Persia, so that he made a proclamation throughout all his kingdom, and also put it in writing, saying, and then he goes on to make his proclamation. This king here had just conquered the Babylonians, and the Babylonians were the ones who had Israel under captivity. And I'm not sure if this pertains to Daniel's time when they were, or this is far past Daniel. But here, King Cyrus is coming. He had conquered the Babylonians. He had freed the Jews from the Babylonians and told them they could basically go back to Jerusalem. So they were turning exiles. And chapter 2 covers pretty much like all the names. They have 70 verses of names of people who made it out of Babylon. And I'm sure there's, at the end, there's a list of like some 50,000 people who returned to Israel. They didn't have enough room to write all the names. But anyway, here you have, this is a fulfillment here of God's promise in Jeremiah 29:10. This is a brief paraphrase. It says, after 70 years in Babylon, I will free you. And so God used King Cyrus to free the children of Israel from Babylon. And I find this pretty interesting because you see the contrast of like good kings, bad kings, all the way through like Second Chronicles. And you're still continuing that through Ezra. You see King Cyrus as a good king because he did what the Lord told him to do. And in verse 2, it says that, thus Cyrus, king of Persia, all the kingdoms of the earth and the Lord of heaven commanded me to build a house at Jerusalem, which is in Judah. And so here the Lord is speaking to King Cyrus to build a temple unto him. And King Cyrus obeys and allows the building of the temple. So King Cyrus makes the decree that the temple should be built in Jerusalem. And the response to the decree is in verse, I'm running a little too fast here, verses 5 through 11. And the people who respond to the decree are the people of Judah and Benjamin, as well as the priests and Levites. And I also find that pretty interesting because these tribes here are talked about a lot in the Bible. The tribes Judah and Benjamin. These are the northern tribes, the good tribes. If you look at like the good kings throughout the Bible, most of the good kings came from one of those two tribes of Judah and Benjamin. So these are the two tribes that respond to that, the decree, and start the commencement of building the temple. Thank you. Sit right next to me. I feel more pressure. All right.
I'm not with you. You can do all things through Christ.
Hezekiah, you just asked Slavic to help you too.
All right, here goes my notes. All right, so it's also interesting if we look at verses 5 through 11. Let's see which verse it is exactly. Not sure, it's right in there. But some of the people who returned from, who were in Babylon, didn't choose to actually return to Israel. They decided to remain in Babylon because they were either comfortable with their lives or they had businesses or whatever, and decided not to return back to Jerusalem. And I'm like, wow, like you get the chance to like go back to your home, and you're like, no, I'm fine. I've kind of grown, at home here. And I think this is kind of like this is like pretty applicable to us as well, because the reason in the first place that Jerusalem was, or not Jerusalem, I keep referencing Jerusalem to the Jews. The reason the Jews were in captivity in the first place was because of their sin. God allowed King Nebuchadnezzar to take them to Babylon as a punishment and exile from their home. And now they choose to continue in that exile, even though they could return home. And so, I mean, that's like, it's kind of like when we are in sin and we are under punishment in sin, do we continue to be in that sin even though God gives us the option to be free from that sin? And he gives us the option to do that every day through his word, through people who come along us and say, hey, you know, you should be living in this sin. Go and move on. So that is pretty, I guess, convicting to me. And so you have here, along with the people of Israel turning to Jerusalem, you also have the articles of the Lord, which were in the temple, which Nebuchadnezzar had taken and pillaged when he destroyed Jerusalem, being returned. King Cyrus allows those to be returned, and he actually has some persons count of them. But in verse 8, it says, and Cyrus, king of Judah, brought out by the hand of Mithridath the treasure and counted out to Sheshbazzar, the prince of Judah. And the numbers are listed in verses 9 and 10 of the articles of the house of the Lord. And so not only is he freeing the children of Israel here, he's also, he's gung-ho all the way for them. He's like, all right, so you guys are free, and now you guys need to go build your temple. You guys need to restore your land. He's like all the way behind them, encouraging them to go follow the Lord's lead. And he appoints this guy named Sheshbazzar, which I'm going to butcher all day, as a leader, because he's kind of like a prince of Judah. And I found this kind of interesting. Later on, there's another leader that starts building the temple, Zerubbabel, and his name means born of Baal, and like that kind of seems not the name to have a leader of the children of Israel, but he was appointed as leader later. So that's just kind of interesting. Anyway, Sheshbazzar dies shortly after returning to Israel, and then his nephew, who I just mentioned, Zerubbabel, takes over. And anyway, Zerubbabel was a leader when they returned back to Jerusalem. And in chapter 2, they have the list of names of all these people who returned back to Israel. So if you have, an hour and a half or whatever, you can read through all these names and try to pronounce as many. It's actually really interesting to listen to like an audiobook of the Bible and listen to them try to like pronounce the names, like pause between every name, try to pronounce each one. So yeah, these are definitely names you could name your future children, etc. So many different names I've never heard before. So
I have a question. I don't know where these because it says for example the sons of Era or whatever 775. Is that like a head of a house? Or is that I don't know, like a city? Like these people came from the city originally or something, or
So that's a good question. I do not know the answer to that. I think it's probably referencing more towards like a city or a group of people, because it references like the sons of Solomon. Mm-hmm. And so these could be like generational, but they wouldn't be directly just the sons of Solomon, because Solomon had been dead for a while. Mm-hmm. So they would be like the grandchildren of Solomon or relation, descendants, etc. So just like they say the children of Israel are the descendants of like Jacob and stuff. So I'm not sure if they directly are related in the lineage or whether it's just kind of like a household type thing. So it's a good question. I'll have to do more research. So let's see. Anyway, Zerubbabel, he was one of the leaders who brought the people back to Jerusalem, and also Jeshua, who is son of Jezadok, or Jehozadak, how you pronounce that. He was high priest during this time, so he's a pretty important figure during all this here. And just some of the people of importance who return include the priests, the Levites, the singers and descendants of Asaph, the gatekeepers of the temple servants, descendants of the servants of Solomon, and the governor, who actually is really important in this chapter and will come up later in this chapter. And it's also really interesting here at the end of chapter 2, there were some people who claimed to be priests coming back. And I if these people are just trying to take advantage of the office, and they're like, okay, wait, there's nothing really established here in Jerusalem as we're coming back. We can be these prestigious people. But the governor said they couldn't be officiated until they could find the divine will of God by these stones called Urim and Thummim. Apparently, these stones here the priests used to how do you say this? To tell if God was able to appoint someone, they would use these stones. So that's actually kind of interesting. I didn't even know about these stones before I read this passage. And those are in verse 62 and 63, I think is where that's a reference. And there were a lot of Jews who returned to Jerusalem. There's approximately 50,000 Jews that were listed here in the numbers that returned to Jerusalem. The exact number is like 4,000. No, I mean not 4,000, 40,900 something. Yeah, and then they start rebuilding the temple in chapter 3. So here you have first the erection of the altar in verses 1 through 3. It says here, and when the 7th month, this is verse 1 in chapter 3, had come, and the children of Israel and the people gathered together as one man to Jerusalem. And Jeshua the son of Jehozadak and the brethren of the priests of Zerubbabel and son of Shealtiel and his brethren also arose and built the altar of God to Israel to burn offerings on it, as written in the law of Moses and the man of God. And I find that this is pretty interesting. Out of all the things to build in the temple first, they built the altar, showing their dedication to God, immediately resuming the sacrifices that they had made before they went under captivity. I feel like part of this is in thanks of being freed from Babylon, and the other part is just dedication to the Lord. And they built the altar in its original place where despite there being people, the other nations around them that oppose. And you'll see the first opposition happens in chapter 4, where they start reaching opposition to building the temple. And they resume sacrifices, regular sacrifices, the daily sacrifices, Mosaic sacrifices, all the way through chapter 3. And they really start laying the foundation for the temple in verses 8 through 13. And the foundation of the temple was laid like 6 months after the previous event. So whether they had a break or they were just doing sacrifices for like 6 months and they started laying the foundation of the temple. I'm not sure exactly how that worked out. But Jeshua, and I'm pretty sure this is in Jeshua, but he was in charge of laying the foundation for the temple along with the Levites. And you have here, when they had finished laying the foundation for the temple in verses 11 through 13, there's a lot of mixed responses. Some of the onlookers, they gave a great shout of praise and gave praise to the Lord, saying, "For he is good and his mercy endures forever towards Israel," because they were happy to see the temple being constructed and on its way. But then there were those who had seen the former temple of Solomon, and they wept. And I'm like, wait, why are they weeping? Like the temple's being built. But they wept because they knew that the temple wouldn't be as grand as Solomon's temple. And I think this is kind of like a sad thing, knowing that, the house of your Lord, which was the temple in that time, wasn't going to be as grand, as great as it was before, just because of the circumstances. They weren't able to, put in as much, fanciness, and just effort and et cetera into the temple, because they really didn't have the resources to be able to do that after coming from exile. And I feel like they still should be happy because they're building the temple, and if they're giving their all to the Lord, that's really what the Lord wants. He doesn't need them to build, this fancy temple for him to house him. And I mean, that goes for our personal lives as well. If even you look at like the widow in the New Testament who gave her one mite, and here's the Pharisees putting in their thousands of pennies or whatever, and they have plenty at home, but they didn't give their all. But I feel like Israel here gave their all, and they should be happy for that because they gave all that they had to the Lord. And so here you get down to chapter 4, the first resistance to rebuilding the temple. And you'll find a pattern. It's really interesting. Every time the temple was resisted throughout Ezra, they literally use the same strategy every single time, and it works. And I'm like, wow, it's amazing. So the kings really have not caught on to this strategy. And the strategy that they use here is they question the authority of the temple being rebuilt. So in chapter 4 here, they are approached here by the enemies of Judah and Benjamin and people of the north. And they first they come at them and they say, hey, can we build your temple with you? Because we worship your God as you worship your God. But these tribes of the north, actually tribes is probably not the right word, the people of the north, they don't worship the living God. And so they are rejected by the people of Israel when they try to come and build the temple with them. In chapter 4, verses 2 and 3, it says, they came to Zerubbabel, the heads of the fathers in the houses, and said to them, let us build with you, for we seek your God as you do, and we have sacrificed to him since the days of Esarhaddon, king of Assyria, who brought us here. But Zerubbabel and Jeshua and the rest of the heads of the fathers in the houses of Israel said to them, you may do nothing with us to build a house for our God, but we alone will build to the Lord God of Israel, as King Cyrus, the king of Persia, has commanded us. And this stand that they made against the people of the north, the people of the north really did not like this. So now the people of the north are going to start causing trouble for them. So you can see that these are really not people who would want to come and worship with God, because now they're like, okay, well, they don't let us come worship with you. Now we're just going to destroy your worship. And so they start causing trouble and basically make it hard for the children of Israel to build the temple here. And verses 4 and 5 talk about where they were offended by the refusal of Israel and caused their building to be hindered for a while. And that is under the reign of King Cyrus. So later, under the reign of King Xerxes the first, I guess there's a lot more Xerxes than one. You have here this here isn't directly referenced being Ezra, but this is during the same time period, really the time period of Esther, the story of Esther. And this is how I say this. This is what I've studied, and if you guys know otherwise, if I'm like speaking off, then let me know. But from what I said, here's the time of Esther, where King Xerxes also opposes the children of Israel, and that's briefly mentioned, but it's not really covered in Ezra. So I don't know if that was before or after, or whether that has a totally different time period. But then you have the reign of King Artaxerxes, and that one is directly mentioned in Ezra. Chapter 4, verses 7 through 23. 7 is where it mentions his reign here. In the days of Artaxerxes, also Bishlam, and then it mentions some other names here. And another complaint was raised up here. And instead of going directly to the children of Israel this time, they consult the king. So you have here these 3 men here that are listed, Bishlam, Mithridath, and Tabdiel. And they go to the higher officials, which are Rehum the commander and Shimshai the scribe. And the commander and the scribe write to King Artaxerxes, and they write a complaint to the king. And I find it's really interesting the way they write the complaint to the king. Listen, this is the way they start start off the letter. In verse 12, they say, "Let it be known to the king that the Jews who came up to you have come from Jerusalem and are building the rebellious, evil city." That's how they describe Jerusalem. I mean, there you go. There you know what type of people they are based on the start of the letter. They didn't even give like a fair trial to Jerusalem, saying they're building a city and we think it's evil. They're like, it's evil and rebellious, and we know it is. So stop them from building it. And they are finishing its walls and repairing its foundations. And they appeal to the king in a lot of humanistic ways. One, they appeal to the king in saying, "Hey, you know, if they build this city, not only are they going to dishonor you and rebel against you, they're not going to pay tribute taxes to you because they're their own entity. They're going to, not be under your reign. You're going to lose control of this kingdom, so you should do something about this kingdom." And the way they phrase this is, should damage be done to the kings? And this is in verse 22. Why should damage increase to the hurt kings? And they're appealing to the kings like ego here, and they're saying, "Hey, you know, why should you be like lessened? So you should stop this city from being built so that it doesn't rebel from you." And unfortunately, King Artaxerxes gives in, and he sends back a response and says to halt the building of the temple. Let's see. However, he gives a clause, and this is in, let's see, later down, he sends an answer, and so forth.
Verse 21?
21? Yes, thank you. Verse 21, he says, "Now give the command to make these men cease, that the city may not be built until the command is given by me." And I can't help but feel like he's a little bit cautious here, because he's like, yeah, stop them, but just in case I change my mind, I might give a counter command to this. Because I'm sure he's heard of the children of Israel and the reputation of their God. And so he's kind of like being a little cautious here with stopping the building of the temple. And later, much later, this is like 20 years later, or in his 20th year of reign, he does revoke his order, in which the continuation of the building of the temple resumes through Nehemiah. And that's in Nehemiah chapter 2. And another thing here I thought was pretty interesting is right after they received the return of the letter from the king, Rahum and Shimshai, these men who were set up by the evil men, the general and the scribe here, they already have an army assembled to immediately stop Israel. They didn't even like wait for the king's response. The moment the king's response came, they're like, all right, we have the army in place, go ahead and stop these people from building. And so they stop Israel from building. But they do much more than that. In Nehemiah 1-2, it references the destruction that Rahum and Shimshai actually did to the temple. They by this time they had already rebuilt a section of the wall, and they were continuing to build sections of the wall. And so they went and they destroyed the part of the wall that had been built, and they burned down the gates. And that destruction is recorded in Nehemiah 1-2. So now they reset Israel down to square one again. And Israel's probably thinking, okay, so we got free out of the land of Israel. I mean, free out of Babylon. We're here in our homeland. We're trying to build our temple. We're trying to build our walls back up. And now we reach opposition again. And I'm sure they're very disheartened and wondering, what is the Lord doing here? He's freed us, but has he really freed us? Because now we just can't become a nation again because of all this, the resisting here. However, they do eventually restore the temple much later. They resume rebuilding the temple in chapter 5 again. And it references here in verse 1 the prophet Haggai and Zechariah. The prophet here, Zechariah, he prophesied to the Jews here. And the reason it's referencing the prophet Haggai is because earlier children of Israel were proclaimed under judgment because of their disregard for the temple. And this was back when the temple was reconstructed. And in Haggai 1, it talks about the Lord talks about, hey, you guys have all these fancy houses with shingles and, all these fancy houses, but yet here the temple lays in disregard and ruin. And you guys aren't, willing to put effort into this, and you guys are all living in luxury. You're not showing regard to the Lord. And so he puts them in a famine. And that famine there caused the people of Israel to realize their sin. However, they did not repent, and that's where King Nebuchadnezzar came in and punished them for further sinning, etc. And so they're really rebounding here from quite a difficult time. First a famine, and then now captivity, and now they're free here. So it makes sense why the first thing they do is go back and build the altar, because they're probably in their brains like, the reason we're here is because we didn't regard the temple of the Lord, so we better build that first thing. And now they're building it, and now they're getting resistance, and they're like, okay, so what does God actually want us to do? So they start rebuilding it, and shortly after they start rebuilding it, the authority of the rebuilding is questioned again in verses 3 through 17. In verse 3, it says, at the same time, Tattenai, the governor of the region beyond the river, and Sheshbazzar and Boznai, the companions, came to them and spoke this to them. Command build this temple and this wall. And accordingly, in verse 4, we told them the names of the men who were constructing the building. And so here the leaders of Israel tell the governor here who gave them the authority. King Cyrus gave us the authority here to build the temple. And they tell them the whole spiel of the whole story of what had happened. And it's interesting to see the response of Tattenai, because he writes a letter to the current king, who is now King Darius, or Darius, how do you pronounce that? And it's interesting how he starts off his letter and writes his letter. Instead of putting the children of Israel in a bad light and saying these are evil people, he tells tells the king exactly what he was told from the children of Israel, the account of what has happened and why they're building the temple. And they said King Cyrus, and he says in verse 17, now therefore, if it seems good to the king, let a search be made in the king's treasure house, for which is in Babylon, whether or not the decree was issued by King Cyrus to build the house of God in Jerusalem, and let the king send his pleasure concerning this matter. And so I would put Tattenai in a group of people who are maybe not following the Lord, but are not opposing the Lord. Because here he's not writing to the king in an evil intent to stop Israel. He is writing to the king honestly from what he has observed and saying, hey, they said King Cyrus gave him permission, check the book, see if King Cyrus gave him permission. And then, if he did, we'll let him continue building. And sure enough, in chapter 6, they get the response back, and the King Cyrus did decree them to build, and they allowed the temple to be reconstructed. But I just find it interesting throughout all of these examples, you have 2 or 3 different kings. So you have like Darius, you have Artaxerxes, and Cyrus. And out of those 3 that were mentioned, you have one that's bad, corrupted by the bad people. He caved in because they approached his ego. Then you have 2 that were good. One was commanded by the Lord, King Cyrus, to build the temple. And then you have Darius, who was basically presented, this is Israel, this is what they're doing. And he was able to make a judgment call and allow them to continue building the temple. And each time the children of Israel were opposed, if you look out of I think it was 2 or 3 times they were opposed here, it's mentioned. 2 out of 3 of those times, it was the people of the north who opposed them. And I can't help think about currently with the temple being rebuilt in Jerusalem, how the lands around them are opposing them from rebuilding the temple. I mean, this is like, it's amazing. It's a building. Like, let them build it, right? But it's more than just a building, because it's a building to God. So there's always opposition when you stand for truth and when you stand for right and when you're doing the right thing. Jesus says in the New Testament that those who stand with him will be hated by the world. And so this is a challenge to us as well. You know, do we have enough faith in our God to be able to do what he has told us to do? And he tells us what to do with his word, to be able to continue through, years of trials, etc., to be able to complete what the Lord has told us to do. So yeah, that's what I have for you today. I hope you guys got something from that. If you guys have questions, feel free to ask.
Thank you.
You feel less stressed?
Do I feel less stressed? Yes.
We're all done.
I think that's the guy should do it next week.
Yeah, it's good. Pastor Center will be there. He'll be like, yep. You know my shoulder. Yep, you're going right.
What chapters are you reading next week? Because we did 1 through 5, right?
Yeah.
So
I think it's 6 through 10 next week. It should have been 1 through 6, because 6 kind of like ties into the end of 5, but I was assigned 1 through 5. So I think that's where the confusion was. Because 1 through 6 talks about the ending and reconstruction. Yeah. All right. Well, let's go ahead and close the prayer. Actually, before we do that,
I was going to say that we take prayer requests. I don't have my phone, Sarah. Can you find?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Any prayer requests? Go ahead.
My dad was, I had taken to hospital on Friday. I had to call an ambulance to pick him up. We were told that it was a virus that just came and went, but he temporarily lost mobility in his legs, and he had a high fever and low oxygen for the last, I want to say 48, 72 hours. Thankfully, he was able to come home yesterday, but he's not at 100%. He says he does, but we wanted him to take it slow, so prayer for him.
Real quiet in here today.
All the requests like I in the back of your rooms, just waiting to come out.
I think most of them came out on Thursday when there were some people here, but not everybody comes on Thursday. Susie,
I could share. I shared on Thursday, I think with the girls group, but my sister-in-law, I've been discipling her recently. It's really great, but she had an interaction with a friend of hers that is not a believer, and her friend has recently been trying to learn more about God. So her friend, I apologize, her name is Kaylee, went to another friend of hers who is a Christian, I guess, and went into it very excited to learn about God and left very discouraged. Like, from what I understand, like, this friend communicated to her is like, you need to be perfect at all times, and if you do anything wrong, then you're going to hell. And that's what was communicated to me. I don't know exactly what was said, but like, my sister-in-law, her name was Ashley, I was really pleased that she could immediately identify, like, that's not what the Bible says. Like, that's not true. You shouldn't feel scared. Like, so that was really great. But she asked me if, like, we could maybe get together and just, like, talk about what does the Bible really say, and just, like, use that as, like, a witnessing opportunity. So just pray that can get set up, and that also this girl's heart is just open to the gospel, the real gospel, and that, it'll be a blessing for her to do that. So. Yes, Kaylee. I asked my sister, I was like, what's her name? She's like, why? I'm like, so that I can pray for her.
It's just like, why?
What's her name? But, yeah, Kaylee. I think it's like K-A-Y.
So I have two. Pray for Paco And Naomi's, so it's Naomi's brother, but Paco's brother-in-law. He needs housing. Housing that he has right now kind of fell through, and pray that he'll get some good Christian people that'll be around, because he's definitely kind of being challenged in that area. He hasn't been around good Christian guys, and so his faith is being kind of tested.
Do you know Naomi's my cousin? So David.
Oh, I do know.
Yeah.
Oh,
Well, I guess she's not. But
gotcha.
yeah.
I know that. So would be Naomi's brother and Paco's brother-in-law.
That's so complicated.
But I remembered it, Ken. That's a big piece of
I can remember that.
Yeah, you could just say Ken. The second one would be. We still have talked since our argument. I did apologize, but that still has not changed.
I've got two. So for one, just for a lot of the people like Kim, just kind of reading their emails of how the summer is going. A lot of them are already getting tired, and I know it's hard because they had just kind of finished up their junior weeks right now, and junior takes up a lot out of you. So just for energy and strength as they continue on into the rest of the summer. And then I wanted to give an update on Phil, because I got this yesterday. It's such a huge praise. So basically his sister, I had told you guys that the leukemia had spread really aggressively to his spine. So he went under more chemo and actually required a bone marrow transplant. And it just kind of had taken a lot out of him to a point where he really just wanted to give up. But let's see, so it says, which was, we got test results back that after several rounds of chemo, he has zero leukemia in his spine central nervous system. This is a huge answer to prayer. We still have a long road ahead as they continue testing to make sure the leukemia remains at zero and we prepare for bone marrow transplant. But he has continued to fight and be an inspiration to me. So it's just like a huge praise that they, like, it just kind of came out of the blue. And I know it was really rough for him. I was even noticing the stuff he was posting. You could kind of tell that it's taken a really big toll on him and his spirit. So just for continued strength to get past this, even with this huge blessing now, and continue to pray that it stays at zero and that it doesn't come back anytime soon.
I know a young college age girl, her name is Kami, Kami. She needs to make some decisions regarding a relationship that she's in. There's nothing really wrong with the relationship. It's just she's not sure whether this should continue or, just the Lord's will for both of them. She just doesn't know. It doesn't quite feel like maybe that's where they need to be, but just don't know if they need to be together or not.
So did you get a job?
Not yet. So
I have a phrase. Some of you might know that my dad has struggled to keep a job for the last couple of years. In the same industry for about 30 years. And just due to hypocrisies and stress and bad bosses and companies, he decided to leave, and he's taken several jobs. I don't even know how many people. But recently was able to find something with Ferguson Plumbing, and seems happy and excited to do it. They were excited to hire him, so hopefully he won't stress out my mom and sister too much. God will keep him there, or at least until he finds something God's really calling him to. So
Is he a plumber?
no, he has a CDL, so he can drive. So
Okay.
he'll be like, he knows about plumbing, but he'll be probably delivering supplies and things that they make to the stores or vendors or maybe some customers, things like that.
Okay.
My fiance and I are still looking for housing. We do have backup plans and we'll have somewhere to be, but it's really difficult.
That's not easy.
So you pray that God.
Mm-hmm.
We know he will, but
Mhm.
sooner rather than later. The Lord's just been doing some things in my life where I think I know where He wants me to go, but at the same time, I'm not sure. So there's just been some doors that are opening, a lot of doors that have been closing, and I just need a lot of direction because I found an opportunity. I don't know if it will work out, and even if it does open up to me, I don't know if it's what I'm supposed to do. So just for guidance, because figuring out career and education has been a pain in my life lately. So
Yeah.
All right, we want to stretch the awkward silence longer. All right, let's go to the Lord in prayer. And you have to forgive me if I don't mention your name specifically. I still have to know a couple people here. So actually, we should just get this out on the front end here. Remember your name? Sure. I can go you as well. Nate, and then
Estrella.
Okay. You were the one, your dad, hospital.
We're gonna quiz you at the end of this.
And then Val, Victoria. Start with a B, so I
They're probably close.
Okay, I would also give a quick list of other names, but we'll get around to other people I don't know specifically after. All right, let's go to Lord in prayer. Dear Lord, thank you for this day, Lord. We've come together in your house and worship you. And we just want to cast some prayers to you, Lord, and also some praises. We just pray for Estrella's dad, Lord, and we praise you, Lord, that you are a good God. But we just pray that you would be able to help him with this situation, the virus, Lord. And we just thank you that things are getting better, but we just pray that you give strength and just patience and endurance, Lord, for that. We also pray for Tiffany, Lord, and for her friend, Kaylee, I believe, that you would just be able to use her and her sister to lead her to the Lord, that they would be a good witness and testimony, Lord, of you. And we also pray for Paco and Naomi's brother. You would just provide the place, Lord, for him to stay, that if possible, that he would have a Christian landlord or just be surrounded by people who are in your daily, Lord, and that he would be able to, when he is challenged in his faith, Lord, be able to stand on your truth, and your truth is sufficient for him. But just bring people along, Lord, Christians that would be able to encourage him in his struggles, Lord. And we also pray for Sarah, Lord. We pray for the prayer request that she brought forward to you, Lord, for the energy and strength of the people who are looking at a camp. We know that can be just tiring, just being ministry for you, Lord. Just being up there gets tired. But we just pray for their continued energy and strength. And we also pray, or actually more praise, Lord, that the leukemia is gone, and just endurance for this person, Lord. And we also pray for the Debbie Dirksen that she brought before you, Lord, that is, I can't remember. And Lord, that I pray that you would just give her wisdom whether she should continue in this relationship or not. And just, Lord, help her to seek you first and realize that if she is seeking you, that you will be able to provide what she needs. Pray for Caleb's dad. Just a praise and prayer request. Praise that he was able to find a job that he's enjoying and is relatively convenient. We also just pray that he would be continued in this job and that it would be the place for him to be. We know that you have a divine plan for everyone, and that we just hope that this is your plan for him. And then pray for Taylor and her fiance as they are looking for housing. We just pray that you would be able to provide that, provide it quickly. We know that everything is in your time, Lord. But for our time, Lord, we're humans and we're finite. We just hope that you would just see fit to open that door very quickly. This would get sorted out. And then finally, we pray for Victoria. And we just pray for all the open doors that you have given her. But we also pray for you to give her wisdom. As there are many open doors, it can be very confusing which one to take and which one is from you, Lord. Just lead her along your path, Lord, so that she can be in a place where you want her to be. And we just pray for everyone else that we would all go away today, Lord, and just take something away from today, Lord, that we can apply to our life and live and become better Christians and better witnesses for you. Thank you again for this group, Lord. In Jesus' name. Amen.